Hello YouTubers, Alaska Prepper here. Ladies and gentlemen, for those of you that may be new here, and for everyone, realize that 2023 will be far worse than most people even imagine. And I'm going to go down through a list of things that will hopefully wake you up to the fact that 2023 is not going to be any better than 2022. And I believe that it's even going to get worse going into 2024 all the way through 2027 as far as food production and just the things that are going on in the world. So if you're someone like this right here, let me read this to you because this is, in a way, is kind of funny and in a way it's not. I pulled this off of Survival Living's community post. It's a comment that someone left behind, and I'm not going to throw the person's name under the bus that left this, but this person says, you can read for yourself. He says, I would like to thank all of you that are stockpiling food for causing the food shortage. Congratulations, you have raised the price of food on everyone else about you're sitting there with more food than you need. Others are going hungry because the food is skyrocketing, or the skyrocketing food prices due to food shortage in your causing. Obviously, he was probably very passionate when he was typing this, or maybe he just can't type very well. But pretty much this person here is saying that people that are stockpiling foods are causing the high food prices and all. And he couldn't be more wrong. Let me tell you this. For those of you that are new to prepping or that are considering to get prepared, do not listen to this nonsense. People that are prepared, they are the solution. They are not the problem. People that took years to build up their pantry to a level that they can sustain their households for 1, 2, 3 months, 6 months, or a year. It doesn't matter for how long. They did it slow and steady, and they went out there and bought an extra 2 or 3 of this or of that whenever they had the extra funds, when they went out shopping and they stocked up their pantries. They are not the problems. We are not the problem. The problem are those of you out there. And if you're one of them, look at yourself in the mirror and admit that you are part of the problem because you are not prepared. Because when there is a shortage or when there is panic buying, it is you that will be out there panic buying during a time when the supermarkets cannot keep up with the demand because people were not prepared. If everyone prepares slow and steady throughout time, supermarkets have time to refill the shelves. Producers have time to produce that product to put on those shelves. So take a look at yourself. Take a look at your pantry. If your pantry is empty, or if your pantry has 1 week's worth of food in it, maybe you ought to consider adding onto your pantry slow and steady. Things are getting more expensive, but there is still food out there to be had. And there are many other factors of why food is more expensive nowadays, just like everything else is. But I want to caution you that when you read someone's comment that is like this one right here, don't pay attention to this, because what these people are doing here is they're trying to set you up for failure. Because of their inaction, they think that you ought to not act as well to preserve your family's well-being in the future. However, let's go ahead and stop talking about that. I just like to point these things out so that you are not fooled into not preparing. You need to be prepared. For all of these years, do you all know who the Mormons are? Mormons, I believe that it's Mormons. They believe that you should have, like, part of their religion is that you should have at least 1 year's worth of sustenance. And they've done that for years. But has anyone ever called them out during good times? During good times, during times where there's no shortages or anything like that, no one's ever called anyone out for being prepared. But when there are shortages, and those people that are prepared are the ones that are better off because everyone else prepared to fail by not preparing, then these guys right here come out of the woods and they say, hey, it's your fault. These are the people, ladies and gentlemen, that when there is a major crisis, in my opinion, they will be the dangerous ones. They will be the ones that scream the loudest, that say, hey, that guy over there, he's been preparing. Let's go take his food. Why? Because they were too lazy to get up off their butt and do whatever it was that they needed to do in order to ensure some security for themselves and their families in hard times. Anyways, I wanted to go ahead and go over this article right here by Mr. Snyder. And I'm not going to read the article verbatim. What I did is I took a few notes. I will leave the link to this article so that you can revisit it and read it. But pretty much what I'm going to go over is everything that he speaks about here, because everything that he talks about here makes sense and it's actually happening right now. And if you are new to prepping, or if you are considering getting prepared, if you can sit here and listen to all of the reasons that I'm going to give you as to why it is that right now is the best time for you to start preparing. Actually, a year or 2 years ago would probably been the best time for you to start preparing for what's coming ahead. But if you're not, you still have time to prepare. But these are the reasons why. And this is just a very small fraction of the reasons why you need to be prepared right now. Stock up on as much food as you possibly can right now. Don't wipe out the shelves. Go out there every payday and do what I call a payday prep. Get a little bit every payday that you're going to go ahead and add to your pantry. And whenever your pantry is full and you take something out of it, make sure that you fill in the gaps and you keep that pantry stocked. Because you never know, ladies and gentlemen, when one day you're going to go to the supermarket and they're not going to have what you need, or if the supermarkets will be open at all. Anything can happen at any time. But the question that you have to ask yourself is, are you prepared to feed your family? When they come home from school and say, hey, Johnny and Jimmy, they came to school and they were starving because they have no food at home. Are you going to be able to tell your children, don't worry about that. That's never going to happen to us. And put them at ease. That way they don't have to worry about it. Because I guarantee you this, it's already happening. Schools are already running out of food to feed children in schools. Children that depend on programs that allow them to buy food at a cheaper rate, they're already being cut off. They cannot afford to buy food. Foods are having to substitute lower quality foods to give the children because they cannot afford to buy it or they cannot source it. So are you going to be the type of person that tells your children, hey, you don't have to worry about it. We're going to be okay. I can do that. I can look at my child in the face and say, you don't ever have to worry about that because we're going to be all right. I'm going to make sure that I take care of that and that you'll never have to go without, because that is my duty as a parent. That is my responsibility as the head of the household, is to make sure that my family has what they need. So don't listen to these people that pop out of the framework, that pop out of the woods and tell you, hey, you're the problem. You shouldn't be doing this, you hoarder. No, you're not a hoarder, ladies and gentlemen. What you're being is you're being responsible and taking care of your responsibilities first and foremost. It is your responsibility to take care of your family, not the government's. And if you're too lazy to get up off your butt and do something about it, then you will suffer the consequences. See what you did? You got me excited. So I made a list, a long list of everything. I'm just going to talk about it here. I'm going to be reading off of it real quick. And this list should convince you that if you're not prepping, you better get to be prepping. The food crisis of 2023 will be far worse than most people would dare to imagine. And I have to agree, but I agree also, and I think that going forward, 2024 to 2027 and on, like I already stated, it's going to be even worse. So stock up now. 2/3 of all European fertilizer production plants are shut down. 2/3, ladies and gentlemen, of all of the fertilizer plants in Europe are shut down. Why? Because they cannot afford to pay for the gas, or they don't have the gas to do it with. And what is fertilizer? Fertilizer equals what? It equals food. It equals yield. In 2023, there will not be enough fertilizer in Europe or any countries that depend on importing fertilizer from Europe. We're having currency problems. If you follow the markets, if you follow the dollar, if you follow the bonds, you'll know that we're having currency problems. And one of the biggest problems, believe it or not, is a problem that many people would not consider a problem. And that is that the dollar is getting so strong. The stronger that the dollar gets, the worse that it is for developing nations or poorer nations to be able to import foods, because they are now having to pay a lot more for those imports than they did before using their own currency. For example, let's say that the dollar goes up against the peso from Dominican Republic, let's say, right? And this month you can trade 50 pesos for $1 American. But let's say that the dollar goes up in value and now it takes 70 pesos to trade in for $1 American. When they import food, they have to pay in American dollars. So now they have to come up with a lot more pesos. They have to come up with 40% more pesos to get $1 than they did before. So their food is naturally going to cost more, whatever they import. And this is affecting a lot of third world nations and developing nations as well. And it's going to cause a lot of hunger and starvation throughout the world. And as the dollar gets stronger, which I believe it will continue to get stronger, the worse it'll be for those nations. We will see a lot of people, ladies and gentlemen, in the future starving, literally starving. Don't let that be you. We may live in the United States of America, for those of you that live here, but it doesn't mean that those things can't happen here. You've already seen that inflation has taken a hold of our groceries, of our electric bills, of our energy bills, of our gas, of housing, of almost everything, if not everything. So don't think that it can't happen here. It's happening here right now, just not at the pace that it's happening in other countries. Weather patterns continue to be erratic. This year, China experienced the worst drought in its history. In its history, ladies and gentlemen. Europe endured the worst drought in 500 years, and the U.S. is still going through a multi-year drought, which is the worst that it has experienced in 1,200 years, marking it a mega drought. And we've all seen that. I believe that the Washington Post, I think it is reporting that about 80% of America, 80% of the United States of America is in dry or worse than dry conditions. And if you don't think that's going to affect the production of our food, then you better do a little bit of research and think otherwise, because it will. They also reported that last week there were approximately 2,000 barges stuck at one point. I believe it's in the Mississippi River. And what does that have to do with food? Well, ladies and gentlemen, barges transport food and other products, right, from point A to point B. If they're stuck there, what's going to happen? The shipping rates are going to go up, and it's going to cost more to ship those things, which means what? It will be translated to the cost that you pay at the grocery store or anywhere else. So on top of inflation, which is a monetary phenomenon, you're also having inflation because of things that happen in nature that were going to happen anyways because of the conditions that we're going through now, i.e. dry conditions, which in my opinion is just a cycle. And it is a cycle, because if it's not a cycle, then they wouldn't say the worst drought in 500 years or the worst mega drought in 1,200 years. It's because it is a cycle. The bird flu continues to kill millions of chickens and turkeys all over the planet. In the U.S. alone, and I didn't know this, it's a lot worse than what I thought. In the U.S. alone, nearly 100 million chickens and turkeys have been wiped out this year. Well, I believe between this year and last year when it first started. The war is restricting the flow of agriculture and fertilizer exports, and it will continue to do so for a long time coming. Why? Because, ladies and gentlemen, this war is not ending anytime soon. And which war is that? You all know, the war between the big R and the big U. That's not ending anytime soon. It's a great way to keep the population distracted and having the people that want to do things in order to stay in power to continue to do them while you're distracted with this war that's going on. And that there is my opinion. That's not something that was reported. The perfect storm that I've been talking about is close to its climax, and it is coming sooner than later, ladies and gentlemen. I've been talking about this perfect storm, about all of these cycles that are going to converge in one point in time. And at that time, everything is just going to get exponentially worse and worse and worse. Why? Because we have a dry cycle, we have a war cycle, we have a cycle, a monetary cycle, we have an economic cycle. All of these cycles, we have a social unrest cycle. All of these cycles are going to converge in one point, and that's going to be like a firecracker going off, but just worse than a firecracker, really. So consider putting a firecracker on the palm of your hand, right? And when it goes off, it's just going to go off, right? So there's not much going on. But then go ahead and put the firecracker on the palm of your hand, and then close this cycle on top of it. This cycle, this cycle, this cycle, this cycle, and hold them tight. When it goes off, there's nothing that you can do. It's going to go off. And that's what's going to happen when all of these cycles converge at one point. It's just going to go off. It's going to be exponentially worse than what we've experienced in several generations past. In the first 6 months of 2022, worldwide hunger increased by 22%. Understand this, ladies and gentlemen. In the first 6 months of this year, 2022, World hunger increased by 22%, and the World Food Program, they are saying that it's going to increase far more in 2023. Why is that? AP, there's food on the shelves. Well, ladies and gentlemen, right now we are eating last year's food. Understand this, that we are eating last year's food. And next year we will be eating this year's food. And if you take a look at the numbers that the USDA has come out with, we're a little bit lower on everything. But it's not just us here in the United States. It's everyone around the world. We're not as bad off as other places around the world. You got Pakistan that lost about 90% of their crop with that flood. China lost a whole bunch of crops with the floods that they've had. That's why they've been importing foods like crazy, now holding more than half of the world's grain in one country. China has 20% or so of the world population, and right now they hold more than half of all of the world grain. Think about that, ladies and gentlemen. All these other countries that have to import foods in order to sustain themselves, where are they going to import those foods from if Europe can't sustain them? If the Netherlands, if the Dutch over there are having to fight their government just so that they can farm, if they can't export foods, if India can't export foods, they stopped exporting wheat, rice, I believe oils or ghee. So you just look at any country. Vietnam, I think they put a tariff on exporting rice. Just look at any country. This is happening worldwide. And the weather is not helping one bit. And erratic weather events, in my opinion, are just going to continue to be more and more and more as the months and years go by. Why? I'm going to throw it in there because we are entering or have entered into a grand solar minimum cycle. Just another cycle, except this one is a grand solar minimum cycle, as where normally we would go through a normal solar minimum cycle. But a grand solar minimum cycle means that we will be scaling down in the number of sunspots that the sun produces for the years to come, which will produce less energy onto the earth. And at the same time, the government is talking about putting stuff in the atmosphere that will reflect sunlight out. Like I said, ladies and gentlemen, a perfect storm will be upon us, and I believe it'll be sooner than later. If things continue down the same path that we are in now, eventually there will be billions of people that face food insecurity. Not millions, billions. 1 in 4 Americans this year, this breaks my heart. 1 in 4 Americans are planning to skip Thanksgiving. I remember talking about this a long time on one of my live streams. And I said, I think that one of their goals is to strip us of our culture. And boy, isn't that something. 1 in 4 Americans are planning to skip Thanksgiving this year to save money. And 1 in 5 doubt that they would be able to afford a Thanksgiving dinner at all. So ladies and gentlemen, everything that I just talked about here in the last, 10 minutes or so, is anything that I talked about something that's not happening or that hasn't happened, I'm sorry. So ask yourself, should you be preparing or should you be listening to that wacko that put out that comment that said that people that are preparing are the problem? If you don't prepare now and you're not prepared, when these things start to happen, when the consequences of what's happening now actually realize themselves into reality, if you're not prepared by then, who do you think is going to be the problem? And who do you think is going to help you and save you? Because there's a lot more people, unfortunately, that are not prepared, that are not preparing, than those that are. And I guarantee you this, my family, my neighbors, my community come first before anyone else. My family first and foremost. If they don't have food on the table, I guarantee you this, no one else will have food on the table. My family comes first. But the question is to you, does your family come first? And are they worth you doing something about it now before it's too late? Having said that, I hope that you got something out of this. I hope that if anything, this woke you up if you weren't already awake. Have a great day, ladies and gentlemen. I'm not sure if I'll be putting out another video today. I might, but either way, remember to be good to each other. When good people do good things happen. Remember to reach one, teach one, and repeat. If we all did this, the world would be a better place, and you know that it will be a better place. Many blessings to all of you and your families. I'm Alaska Prepper, and I am out. God bless.
Nutrient survival isn't just survival food. It's Special Ops grade. Built to the nutritional standards of the U.S. Special Ops and packed with 40 essential nutrients. Formulated to sustain energy, sharpen focus, and keep you and your family thriving during any emergency. Real food, real ingredients. Oh, and a 25-year shelf life.